that round, shall we? The semi that we
Still waiting for.
That one I considered so long during prep. Live stream? No live stream. I want to stay in uni, do I not want to stay in uni? Because what I'm saying is, because we were arguing, make all the education institutions
Mr. Speaker, we are exceptionally just done with a world in which religion continues to oppress people, in a world in which churches continue to assert power over individuals out there, and in a world in which religious authorities continue to justify the fact that they cannot ever be challenged, that the narrative of God and the narrative of religion is forever supreme and can never be challenged. That the existence of individuals and minority groups never really have any forms of incentive to want to stand up and fight for themselves. We think that is precisely why and allow all forms of Christians with regards to the existence of religion, whether it's through conventional methods or whether it's through unconventional methods like satire. We're completely fine with that. For opening up, we'll tell you that we're completely fine with that. We'll allow all these forms of caricatures within society, and media organizations have every right to go ahead with that. Please sit down. We tell you that at the end of the day, religion is exactly harmful and it's an artificial construct. And in status quo, in the absence of any forms of challenge, religion exists within an echo. The context of modern world, the amount of damage religion does is incredible. If you look at conservative society, even in societies where you have diverse population, the amount of rule and the amount of control that religion has is incredible. It says that you can't even question those things. And we tell you that the very fact that religious individuals feel that they cannot be questioned, they cannot ever be challenged, is precisely why, like the Charlie Hebdo massacre took place, where individuals who merely question whether it's through sarcasm or whether it's through conventional methods, were at the end of the day murdered because of the narrative that you cannot ever be challenged. And we tell you that that necessarily needs to end of the day, because religion to a large extent also encourages segregation, and the worst thing is that it rarely allows individual of its system as well. Gentlemen, we tell you it's a construct that says that if you don't believe in it, Israel, you have to still remain within these religious groups. If you go out, you're more often than not threatened, you're more often than not dealt as an outcast within society because of the singular narrative that exists within society. Please sit down. Argument number one, in terms of caricature, why it's particularly important. We think that while we allow conventional analysis or whatever not in status quo that already exists, it is important to allow all forms of dissent to a large extent, where even if it's sarcastic, we're completely fine with it. Most of these views are extreme because it's treated which is not normalized within society. Religious individuals, to a large extent, aren't really normalized the idea of their belief systems being challenged, because it challenges the belief system, it challenges the narratives that is supposedly, but number religious individuals, for their benefit, they can always find tangible evidence to disprove these cartoons, disprove these caricatures, if at the end of the day they don't really mean anything. But to a large extent, most importantly, we just don't want to suppress ideas. We just want to let these ideas to operate within policy. Even if it offends people, we're completely fine with it. At the end of the day, we just don't want to suppress these ideas. Yes.
Surely there must be a middle ground in disagreements with religion without it needing to be an over-intellectualized thesis statement on our side of the house without you needing to descend into describing Prophet Muhammad as being a good fornicator.
See, that's precisely the sort of harms that we don't want. The reason why notice that the characterization, the way Mirza asked his POI was to put religion on a high ground and that you only need intellectual discussions to disprove religion, when it's actually a construct that is blatantly oppressing on the ground. That's the sort of extra credit that we don't really want to give religion at the end of the day. We're perfectly fine if these individuals make fun of those religions. Individuals who believe in those religions, at the end of the day, they can choose if they want to defend the construct that they believe in. So as long as we are able to live in a moderate society that is able to treat one another compassionately in the absence of religion, with that. Secondly, how does it help minorities? We tell you that cartoon far more accessible for minority groups compared to extended 3,000 word analysis on the Atlantic, Mr. Speaker. More often and it's more often than not simple forms of caricatures that easily allows people to relate to it. So we think that it's a lot more important for minority groups like homosexuals within conservative societies to be able to access these things, because it gives them a rallying point to actually realize that the life that they're going through may not necessarily be an absolute. There is actually an opt-out system that they could go out of this. And we think that more importantly, the comparative here is, under their paradigm, in the absence of your ability to condescend religion, in the absence of your ability to ever criticize religion through caricatures, you create these ideas that churches and that religious organizations are supreme and that they have the highest standing within society. We tell you that that's the sort of narrative that we don't want to give. Yes, fine, we completely understand individuals' ability or individuals' choice to actually subscribe to this religion. But when this exact religion and individuals that subscribe to this religion are the very people that oppress people in society, the last thing we want is continue to give them an avenue that the construct that they believe in is more necessarily never ever make. We're fine with religion. We're fine if people want to believe in religion. But religion, if religion is continuously used as a construct to oppress people, if it's continuously used as a mechanism to push people further down the social line, we're completely not fine with that. And we're perfectly fine if people want to condescend this religion through sarcastic or even derogatory caricatures to that matter.
Yeah. We thank the Prime Minister. Maybe not invite the leader of opposition to present the case. Yeah. Good.
Mr. Speaker, if you take away principles that glue a society together, which is respect and mutual understanding of each other's beliefs, angering in that particular region. Okay, everyone has the right to that particular opinion, but they have to know that our opinion, where religion brings peace and comfort to people, are also true, Mr. Speaker, where in which if you try to affirm that religion oppress people, religion also brings comfort and peace towards people who relies and dependent on that religion. No, thank you. Secondly, they say that religion religion is artificial. Actually, this is not the debate. The debate is about how these caricatures specifically offend these minorities who are dependent on their religion. Because more often than not, people of that majority in that society who are offending the minority religions because they don't know much about those kind of religions. So this creates an imbalance of who makes fun of who actually. So, what you think about religion? No, thank you. So also, you don't need people to make fun of religion to leave this bubble of echo chamber. So actually making fun of religion makes you stay in that bubble, Mr. Speaker. So also, to disprove religion, actually, but also under their side, but making fun of religion actually does not disprove religion. It's actually create this kind of bubble in which people think that that religion based on that stereotype is accessible to groups and make people is understand this religion. It's actually wrong because people who are ignorant would think that this offensive distinction is what the religion is about. They think that what the religion is about is based on that caricatures to perpetuate this stereotype and think that that is all about religion. But before
the point in which you allow these constructs to be criticized and to be made fun of, that's when you tell these minorities that this is a construct that is not perfect at the end of the day and it has its flaws.
The minority religion, the minority people always they rely on their religion. You are homogenizing a group of people in which they think that this particular religion is a social construct, but to them they rely on a large part of that minority who sometimes refugees who move to Europe. This debate. So what else actually? So it may contain stereotypes that is typically perpetuated of that society and put it outside for society to see. So it perpetuates this offensive nature where people don't think it's offensive, but to some minority groups they think it's offensive. So yes. So for example, so they would want things like caricatures. For example, they would this particular group who are being offensive would want these things like caricatures of Muhammad having intercourse with a goat and labeling that to reason. So OG will contend that this promotes idea of acceptance. So we're gonna be reasonable and say that more often than not, people who are okay with satirical caricatures are in a sense liberal anyway. So it doesn't evoke any reaction for them. They don't empathize with the kind of struggle that these minority groups are facing when these caricatures are depicting them in a way that is offensive. So problem in this debate is that when you anger the conservative, that society, and trigger them to react aggressively. So that is my third success in which it radicalizes people, which I will talk about more later. So even if not the case, it will anger that, we will argue that how satirical caricatures more often that harass individual in the patronizing nature of that cartoon. So extreme people who believe that their religion is perpetuated through that division, they believe that how that particular people of the religion is based on that stereotype, they will somehow be aggressive towards people in which if the caricatures is violent in nature, they would think that those people are violent in nature, they would want to argue that. It's how in America right now, how the conservative Republicans would think that all Muslims are terrorists, so they would bring in like guns and things to take down Muslims or whatnot. So no, thank you. My first substantive is why satirical cartoon is bad nature. Satirical caricatures are offensive in nature. There is no doubt about it. So it makes it makes fun of people belief and cultural beliefs and history of that particular religious group. So it pokes fun someone who revered the religious symbol, and that's particularly childish, as if you're making fun of someone's mother being big. So you make them angry, you make them feel like an outcast and targeted and isolated from society, like fat shaming, for example. So this contradicts the kind of acceptance that these satirical caricatures want to provoke. Secondly, it allows the privileged to be very offensive towards the minority. So more often than not, it's a particular privileged group of the religion society that makes fun of religion, like agnostic or atheist white majority poking fun of religion. They often don't know more about than the basic stereotypes, because more often than not, they have this lackadaisical attitude toward actually researching what those religion is about. So even if they're not ignorant, they choose to be offensive towards something that is important to a large group of people. So this makes this privilege feel superior to that of the religion belief.
Yes. In diverse societies, religions hold a big part. A big part to differentiate people from each other. As a Christian, and we are different, so we cannot really be friends, right? As much as we want to believe that most of the religions and some of religious teachings tell you to do good to others, to always be positive in life, but people often interpret that in extreme bias. Let's look at Bosnian War, look at Malaysia, where severe tangible harms being done to each other. Example, bombing churches, actually throwing big heads into mosques, and we don't want these things to actually go into the tangible outcome that we want to look at. But before I move into my arguments, let's look into some rebuttals. So the idea is that Christian that's offensive. First, if you are religious and you are very confident that your religion is the right thing, then you can find concrete evidence to prove those things are wrong, and maybe you'll just neglect or ignore all those images. Because it's very hard for them to come out and say the harm is that I feel offended, I'll be radicalized, and I will harm other people. So if you are so religious, as to say, that your religion tells you not to harm others, whether or not you will choose to believe in your Bible, to believe in your Quran, or you will go to the extreme and suddenly be not religious. You don't really understand that idea. To do. So what happened to these people actually? We agree. Some people, but that's the extent and the trade-off that we're going to make. There's the harm where they might be offended or maybe sad to a certain extent. The trade-off we're going to make in exchange for meaningful discourse to happen. Remember, we are not trying to convert these people into atheism. They can have options, and these options can only be done when you have analyzing strong convincing or penetrative information in graphic images when you have to look into. And why people don't often look into other alternatives that actually try to see it wrong, and it's my religion telling me something that's not true. Because first, these people are being indoctrinated, or in a society that's extremely oppressive, it's very hard to access into these information. Yes. Second, it's very hard for these religious people who might have the want to actually escape from religion, to look through 1,000-word articles to actually slowly read through, hey, my religion is wrong, and my religion is actually not the way of life that I when you tell you this graphic may believe in, and this option, how can Jesus walk on water? They actually think about how can wine be water or water be wine, vice versa. And all these
counter narrative and this very important information, that's simple and straightforward information, is extremely crucial to bring in the critical thinking in these people. Everything like all other articles, first either being shut down, or second, even is accessible. These people, it's very hard for them to actually take an active stance to actually read off those things. Before that, close.
Since the intellectual value of your caricature is subjective in nature, interpretive by nature, can you tell us why it's not equally as likely as people will view it as disrespectful and shut down from the discussion that you want to have?
So we are perfectly fine for you to escape from the discussion. So if you not watch these images, I think these pictures actually make some sense. Then you might want to think about whether your religion is right. It's perfectly fine. We are not saying that because it offends to stop everything. Because everything in life offends some people in the world. When something is so normalized, especially religion is deemed superior, we say, wait, for you to have a critical thinking and like a proper meaningful discourse in religion. Everything like these caricatures give you a gateway to escape the overwhelmed narrative that religion is superior. It's up to them whether they believe. They're just indoctrinated and find it extremely difficult to think rationally because everyone is just of course, we don't allow those things to happen. So to the furthest extent, we allow discourse. So you can also have graphic images to portray that atheism is bad. So you can also have graphic images to prove that why your religion is right. No one actually stops you from doing that. But the one of the most effective way when you do other alternatives has failed in these societies. No, thank you. So the third thing that we have to look into in this motion is that in diverse societies, when religious groups hold a significant power to retain power and remain control in the nation, right? So for you to escape that religion is extremely difficult because when they are separated in this in religions, where maybe there are a group of Muslims and a group of Buddhists, a group of Christians, it's very hard for these people to let you go because they want to remain in control. So it's a lot harder for these people to actually realize that this religion is not a good thing or it's not the one life that you want to have because you don't want to go to church every Sunday, but your family tells you it's okay, it's okay as well. So do people think what they say? We don't think so, right? So social media is a gateway or platform for people to discuss about things. So these informations are not actually like forcing you to think otherwise. So it might be convincing. If you find it convincing, we are fine for you to have an option actually escape from that situation. If you're not, we're perfectly fine. Because when the moment that you feel offended, you can just shut down your computer or just click cancel in that tab. Actually, you can move on with your life and become religious in itself. So the comparative is that the harm that you might be offended and have a temporary sad moment, and compared to the option that will give you that realize that your religion is bad and move on in the future, in a meaningful future, you can have all options in your life being accessible to support a world that's fairer.
Deputy Prime Minister.
A government who thinks that everyone should take religion more lightly and that you shouldn't hold it on a high pedestal. What it means, Mr. Speaker, is that you always want individuals from that side of the house to think of their religion in a more lighter side, as though it is not something that you can then submit yourself. Acknowledging that there are some people out there who are part of society who are conservative in nature, for example, or who do believe that it is very important for you to hold religion at a very high pedestal, we think that your scenario is to respect them and is not to make fun and understand what your religion can also be. About in my speech, please stop that bell for the love of God. Firstly, how still related on an imbalanced structure of power, and here's where we explore. Or you always have religious majorities always making fun of the religious minorities in this circumstance and why that's harmful. But second issue, Mr. Speaker, why it becomes harder for societies to also reconcile with each other, exploring this idea of how this discourse that you then create is one that is worse under the outside of the house. Screw the bell, guys. Like, can we really find out where it is from? First issue. If this individual chooses totality that they have under their side. What the real debate is, Speaker. I think that they're saying that we can make mostly that says, hey, let's make fun of Muslims. Somehow Muslim people can no longer fight back against that. Even within France, where Muslims are always the minority. No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's not reactionary at all within their side of the house. It's not a game of you is you, but you don't really feel small at this. Societies to reconcile with each other when you have this power imbalance at the end of the day. We think that at the end of the debate, to offend this person, they will come forward or to tell you that they are likely going to radicalize and have this view of us against the world. And that's why exactly you create enclaves of small Kazakhstani people, Muslims within London and South, who feel that they cannot step out. You know, they kind of Mr. Speaker, we have to understand that the real world where there are societies that can also dominate certain pejorative narratives against you. Just because I'm not on the internet and I don't read the newspaper, that doesn't mean that it will not translate to a religious majority of a person.
And actually tell people, set religion starts oppressing you. Side closing. But first off, a few rebuttals. So let's look at what MUQMIN talked to you about. So they talked to us about the idea where there's a dominant narrative that apparently is in like for one religion. People why your religion isn't that bad at all, or telling us why the dominant narrative is harmful to begin with. So much easier for us to put it on media at that point. It's only at that point we actually have a voice and are able to voice out and tell people that they are being oppressed is wrong. Might be annoyed, but we when you oppress these people, they're still going to think all this is fine. Especially when we talk about diverse societies, that's when we are able to actually make people understand what's right and what's wrong. But furthermore, you need to recognize that even if on the second level, we tell you that, hey, at least people are able to actually react by using their own satirical extensions opening.
What is the likelihood of religious minorities reacting positively to a power dynamic of religious majorities making fun of your religion and making you feel disempowered?
We think one, at least more people are able to actually start talking, and we think they'll be able to talk. Why so? Because now, sure, it's my religion, and then at that point of time, when I'm able to use any means to actually, let's say, retaliate and talk back towards this dominant religion, at that point of time, I'm able to use my satirical caricatures to actually and what it means is at least people now can religion can actually further respect the other religion, because now they see that that religion isn't oppressing them, isn't oppressing their freedom of view, to view. What is to respect you, because now at least you're respecting my own right to freedom of speech. On a second level, we tell you that under the side, when you stop all people like Donald Trump can come up and play the Islamophobia narrative. What does this mean? It means people, anyone can come up. That religion is trying to oppress us, is trying to stop all freedom of speech on the outside. Why so? Because apparently, because they feel. So what this means is when more people, like more Americans, who start hating their religion as Islam even more, because now you paint a target upon their religion. That's when people become even more discriminative towards those people of their religion. That's a harm we want to prevent. But going to my second extension, we look at the nature of satirical caricatures itself. I think opening did a fine job of explaining the idea where we talking about dissent and all. But we're gonna go further and tell you what the other nature of satirical caricatures are. One, the first level, we think satirical caricatures are meant to help people laugh and actually feel more or less happy about it. What does this mean? It means on the outside, at least people can feel less tense over such religious issue. Especially when you talk about diverse societies, if religion is held as so tensely, less people are going to talk about it, less people are willing to talk about it. And it's on the outside when people feel less tense over such religious issues, I'm more likely to actually engage and more likely to talk about such issues. Furthermore, we need to recognize that some people are only able to engage with such comedic scenes because it's the best way to engage with them. But furthermore, you need to recognize that under the outside, if you ban all such forms, it means a lot less people are going to be able to discuss about it. What it then means is you create further tensions within society, because no one's talking about religion. It eventually reaches a more breaking point where society starts breaking down and people become less tolerant over each other because no one is willing to engage with each other. You need to recognize that opposition try to say that. You need to recognize the comparative. Even if some people who shut down on the outside, you need to recognize comparatives under their side. They shut down a large avenue for discourse, which is worse. It means it's harder for anyone under their side to ever talk about it. A lot more people shut down under their side. On the second level, you need to recognize that under status quo, when people associate Christianity with the KKK or Islam and ISIS, we think in a lot of cases, it's the best way for people like a Muslim person to use these caricatures to actually paint a picture saying why there's no the narrative that Islam is ISIS is bad and so on. We think it's the best way for them to actually express their views and defend their own religion and say, hey, this is wrong. At the moment of time you block this, you block this person's ability to actually You defend me.
Yeah. Good battle.
We were very happy to stand in opposition for you to have a verbalized, textualized, or actual intellectual engagement with things that apparently you have so much was enough. Comparatively to the amount of persecution that a Muslim faces in Europe, the fact yearly there was a homophobia in the street. The fact Indians are facing on a regular, you can't rely so people and essentialize them to intellectualistics and stereotype them into things that are harmful in nature. We think that not only is it irresponsible to create caricatures of something that's so deeply held by individuals, but also to encourage the persecution that individuals face in these particular communities. I'll engage with many things that the government talked about in my speech, but later my substantive material. But just very clearly, ladies and gentlemen, we think that the comparative here is that we think this particular minority group in this diverse community comparatively should be prioritized because his access to public life is limited. He's consistently berated for his identity, consistently faces microaggressions, and he has no runaway from it. Because just Xing that particular window doesn't stop you from having to face the prejudice that society will levy upon you later on. But this particular individual that wants to draw that caricature has the option of actually having an article written, actually having the option of having a conversation and still expressing his views, whereas the comparative victim in this particular scenario doesn't have that alternative in our scenario. That's why on a balance of rights in this particular scenario, you should always err on to have an alternative identity. You try telling an individual that's practiced Islam or Christianity for the majority of his life and thinks that his life is based on it, to just say, deal with it, in comparison to a person who may have an alternative at expressing their own views. We think you've purely lost the comparative in terms of expression of rights. Let's go on to extension material. Firstly, I think it's important. They can't even guarantee to us that individuals who internalize the internalized intellectual value of critiquing religion on that side of the house. But what's more likely, ladies and gentlemen, is that this intellectual value is contingent business. This means a liberal context is predisposed into interpreting your drawing based on the social mood. For example, a Paris bombing, ladies and gentlemen, means a liberal context can mean very prejudicial interpretations of that particular drawing. That means consequences that are directly and consequentially bad for these individuals in nature, ladies and gentlemen. That means they essentially cannot guarantee to us that the intellectual value of these things are objectively good in that particular scenario, but we can guarantee you to a fairly large extent that the consequences are oftentimes quite bad on that side of the house. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, the closing government told us that you can always rebut these assertions and therefore have an intellectual discussions and say that these drawings are bad for XYZ reasons. Why is this not possible on the comparative? Two reasons. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, drawings, ladies and gentlemen, they're but also not a clear intellectual value to it. That means several reasons. Number one, there's no accountability for the drawer. That means that you aren't able to hold the person that drew out the caricature into a particular intellectual position that you can hold them accountable to. You hold them to one position, they say that's not what I meant. You say you hold one position, they say that that's not actually the thing that's trying to be said here, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the problem of caricatures as opposed to things that you say. The fact that you aren't able to hold individuals accountable to the opinions that they propagate into society. But the second reason why it's a lot into stereotypes, intellectualizing those particular stereotypes and rebutting them, is because stereotypes are easy to buy in. That intellectual France as well as in Europe right now, ladies and gentlemen, is that people don't have to rationalize and intellectualize those thoughts. The intellectual lazy that the opening government wanted to prioritize are a lot more likely to shut out all intellectual discourse because there's an easily presentable, intellectually lazy alternative for them to buy into those stereotypes while pretending that they know about the issue at hand, ladies and gentlemen. That means what's rich under the government is the intellectual laziness and the substandard level of engagement that exists inside, ladies and gentlemen. That means it is comparatively easier to buy into bigotry in comparison to the intellectual discourse. Achieve that goal and may actually picture that would be prejudicial to someone else. That's why you need to be comparative, Kish, in this particular debate. And that's why the reason why it's important that it's easier to buy into those particular caricatures is because the government can't rely on the fact that people will rebut this or will present a defense for those particular communities, ladies and gentlemen, because we can't rely on the communal and societal mood that's often tipped towards the prejudice of these particular communities. And the reason why it's important on the fourth level, ladies that they can engage with under that means on a balance of rights. Individuals that are minorities that are levied upon this particular claim, ladies and gentlemen, are systematically disenfranchised and disadvantaged in the discourse that you're talking about under that side house. It is a lot more likely that individuals double down, create more aggression, ladies and gentlemen, and communities shield away themselves from the particular engagement that you want under that side of the house. Ladies and gentlemen, you can engage in a million different ways other than making fun of a particular identity, and this is not the way you do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Take a member of opposition. We'll invite the government with any government speaks.
I can't even see myself. Was that live on? No, it's okay, it's fine. It's live stories.
Thanks for so long. Is that Patrick? Yeah, Patrick.
Mr. Speaker, our social fabric is extremely tense, even in diverse societies, as they pointed out, as they fairly pointed out. And when power-hungry politicians hijack this particular narrative of the lack of freedom of speech, and that's when we completely lose it, Mr. Speaker, the ability to defend these particular religions.
Now, the fatal flaw for site closing opposition in choosing not to engage with our extension was to notice that our extension accepted the fact that there are different social groups. That yes, people respond differently after the Paris attacks. Yes, people respond differently after the 9/11 attacks. The question is, Mr. Speaker, is now knowing that there is a tyranny of the majority and that there are minority religions, how exactly do we make the situation in society best for these minority religions and for them to live comfortably, especially in a world that's becoming more and more retaliatory towards these people? Now, what did we extend to you in our speeches? Matthew told you how there is a severe problem of religious blaming, right? And often people correlate the problem of the high amounts of political correctness and the high restrictions on freedom of speech, even though all these bad things are happening and apparently perpetrated by this particular religion, and people attach the blame to that religion and at the same time correlate that blame to political correctness. That's when you have politicians like Donald Trump coming about and saying, it's because of political correctness, it's because of our lack of freedom of speech that our civil liberties are being oppressed. And we cannot become more and more that we are actually part of the society, right? They told us, no, that you can just easily tell them, well, there are two reasons. You don't need to go through caricatures. But that's politically correct and not politically incorrect, which is the narrative that most politicians are taking up, Mr. Speaker, and Republican politicians are taking up. And Donald Trump is gaining a lot of ground for it, right? Because he is saying the things that no one else wants to say in society, and people are happy to hear it, Mr. Speaker, and people are happy to vote for him because they think that these things are very, very important. Just like how Bush during the Iraq War, right, very easily correlated the 9/11 attacks with the same thing as Saddam Hussein's attacks on Halabja, chemical attacks in Halabja, even though they were two completely separate things. But because the social narratives against Muslims were so bad, the tyranny of the majority existed that diluted the discourse with these particular people. That's why politicians hijack the discourse and say, this is what we need to do. Now, Mr. Speaker, we need to be aware that they should be able to engage in this kind of different levels of freedom of speech in terms of drawing caricatures so that they know that their political correctness, their political incorrectness can exist. They can say these things and their civil liberties are not at threat, Mr. Speaker. A very important extension, not really engaged with by closing opposition. We told you further how the freedom of speech makes discourse more accessible, people become less tense. We also told you, Mr. Speaker, that if it's also a self-defense mechanism, right? If people feel like they are being harmed, if they or somehow assumption as well that they're being harmed by the existence of Muslims, Mr. Speaker, then they should be able to have some kind of self-defense mechanism to make them feel better, right? Okay, I'm going to draw a caricature now because I feel that this is how I'm going to discredit that religion, this is how I'm going to make myself feel more secure, my family feel more secure, and people are less likely to join that religion. As opposed to a world where politicians hijack that particular narrative and say, oh, they are oppressing you, vote for me and I'll ban Muslims from this country. First question. How will people respond? Yes.
Counter narratives are not good just because it does exist. It requires resources like political capital, time, and runs the risk of a harmful narrative that your politicians can then run. Why does it still have to exist?
So here's what I'm telling you. I'm going to tell you that counter narratives can exist. Counter narratives can be great for people, but that's not what we are going to stand for. It's obviously true that they're right. Like you can't. It's hard to rebut atheists. Like they're logical. It's hard to, if you're a minority religion, you're definitely going to is that when they are able to say that this religion is bad and that they are able to have freedom of speech in terms of saying, yeah, I don't want to be part of this religion, look at these people, they're doing really bad things, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, sure, it sort of discredits that religion, but at least they get to say these things. And politicians don't get to use the narrative that, you don't get to say those things. Therefore, your society is highly politically correct. Your civil liberties are being oppressed by Muslims. Vote for me, I will ban Muslims all out of the country, right? So we think people are less like, even if people do respond with aggressions, they are less likely to respond with aggression because wait. People will respond to aggression a little bit. Yeah, like I can't defend that. It probably will happen, right? But we think that that is less harmful than a world where Muslims are isolated altogether and not given access to the market altogether, right? So let's talk about a couple of things. They said, well, the power dynamics is bad. Like obviously, there's a diverse society, right? But even society, we think the oppression, like Matthew says, already exists within societies. So like we think that the minorities can have access to the same kind of satire, but even if they don't have access to the same kind of satire, Mr. Speaker, we think it's better because it's better than a nation voting in a policy particularly if and the Muslims are scaring them in whatever way possible, right? Like CEO responded to this and said, well, drawings got no particular value. That is true. They said you can't hold people accountable to their opinions. No problem. They told us that stereotypes are intellectually lazy. So here's the response to all three of those things. It's true that drawings got no value, Mr. Speaker, but the moment they appear on the internet, people give it value. People start talking about it, analyzing it in ways that it previously didn't exist in the first place, right? So they go on multiple levels of analysis on that particular drawing. It's just an impetus. So it doesn't have to be a 6,000 word thesis. It's at least a discourse. To deconstruct that stereotype, as opposed to a world where you don't have the ability to deconstruct their stereotypes, right? We think it's true, CEO's extension, they are unable to defend themselves. But the world is, Mr. Speaker, they are unable to defend themselves. We just need to make it a world where at least they are accepted as opposed to banned from the country altogether or put harsh policies upon by conservative Republican politicians that hijack the narrative of political correctness. They are very, very, very happy to take the reconcile these differences, Mr. Speaker.
We invite opposition to end this.
We believe that religion is an integral part of one's identity and believe at a point in which you begin discourse with ridicule. The messages that you will give, we think, under your side of the house, you hinder the discourse want to talk about because they assume that when they in the first place can't engage in the manner like in the conducive manner, ladies and gentlemen. I will expound this under my issues. But before that, let's talk about myths extension that we receive like scarce engagement of, right? Because we told you how the expression of these caricatures are usually often the expression of these is subjective, ladies and gentlemen, and assessed differently by individuals. We told you how these drawers or illustrators are more often than not are not accountable. We receive scarce engagement from their side of the house because under your side of the house, then we government can ensure that society will defend because on the back coming from closing houses, right? Because they want to talk about on how politicians will hijack the satirical image in order for you to have a flourishing discourse. Ladies and gentlemen, especially when they want to talk about Donald Trump, and they told us how you want to make issue of political correctness, ladies and gentlemen, we think when you want to talk about like pertinent issues regarding minorities, we don't think it should come in the expense of making fun of these individuals, because that's where you make them shut them out, ladies and gentlemen, because we believe you can make a discussion in a much more civil manner in how you engage with these individuals. Because under your side of the house, then there's no limit in how, like, there's no constantly make this kind of claims, ladies and gentlemen. Those kind of things are perpetual in your side of the house. So no matter how oppressive it is, and you stop doing that, we think that effect will still be ongoing, ladies and gentlemen, in the future, where you still will be oppressive towards the Muslims on the ground. So under your side of the house, then that perpetuity, like that the oppressiveness that you really want to fight for will still be ingrained under your side of the house and will still stay there. But let's just assess the which side will then that our Muslims are willing to change, right? Firstly, because they told us how people can still criticize each other. For instance, atheists can criticize religion. Meet has explained this passively, how like atheists don't have like any other symbols like other religions, ladies and gentlemen, and we think like on the balance of probability there is bias, that they told us, oh no, there's no bias, but religious minorities will feel ostracized, ladies and gentlemen, because you shut them out because of the existence of their deity and also the symbols that they have. So the nuance coming from our side of the house, we tell you, even though you told us that like they told us that you can shut yourself out suddenly by just clicking that tab button, we think that other people can still view those satirical images and also internalize it. The way in which we nuance it is that thank you, in how you translate, in how people will then translate the treatment towards minorities, ladies and gentlemen, because now that person will internalize the kind of messages that people put out in the internet. The effect to this is it like throughout their daily life, how they carry out themselves. But secondly, we also think that leaders will then be seen more like, when they seem okay to accept these things, it seems that leaders are tend to like look like they are isolating these individuals. That entrench the kind of prejudice, and also the treatment of society towards these individuals. But thirdly, you also deprive the freedom of these individuals and also religious minorities to live their life, because they can't even go out there and also like go out there, or fathers or mothers are like hindering their children to go to school because of the treatment of society, of how you identify and generalize the kind of individuals and how they work in their daily life because of their because of the caricatures that you want to talk about. So we tell you that on the balance of probability, your side of the house create a bad environment for these individuals to live in, because you generalize through the caricatures that exist. But at least under our side, we tell you that those manner of discussion can still happen, right? So this then leads to my second issue, which side will then like the government told us how there's a religion has a one-dimensional narrative. Look, we tell you under status quo there are already pre-existing narratives, and there's a lot of alternatives in the way which you can interact with these individuals. For instance, like having like discourse, right? We can still create like a multi-dimensional narrative, like, and engage them in a civil manner as opposed to making fun of them, ladies and gentlemen. And at least under our side of the house, we make it clear on how we want to tell them these individuals, where you don't invoke hatred towards them, and which will lead to a radicalization and destructive discourse under your side of the house. But before that,
Ma'am, the reason why minorities feel oppressed is because they believe that the construct is superior than the other. Why would you prioritize a narrative which they believe those narratives are superior?
Right?
Why would you not tell them?
Because these are simple and easy to follow, and they think they have the best of intention of and their views is the most legitimate one. But under your side of the house, since these people are indoctrinated and grow up in a society and religious society that they're ingrained in themselves, you're conditioned into believing your own belief, and your righteous belief is the most truest one. We think on the balance of probability, at least under our side of the house, they will engage in a civil manner as opposed to completely shut shutting you down, shutting you out because of the immediate reaction of that caricature that is insulting towards them, ladies and gentlemen. Because we told you how people assess the expression of caricature is subjective. That's important. In fact, under your side of the house, especially when we want to talk about conservative society, they will then demonize the liberals and shut them out. Why? Because you put them out in public and you call them out. They will then feel victimized. So the discourse that you really want to talk about will then be shut down. Because they reach a tipping point where they can't accept any more of these things. Ladies and gentlemen, under balance of probability, we give you the conducive environment for these individuals to actually want to have a discourse as opposed to your side of the house where they totally will shut these people out.
The team's cross the ball, the hands, we're outside. Okay.